Mm, We can start, Jason. So, hello everyone. Good evening. Good evening, all. I'm Minodini, a member in Suk Chennai. So here today we have Jason, who is working as a manager and who is a technical evangelist in Sitecore. Who will take us through a trip to Sitecore 10. So, over to Jason. We are very excited to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a big honor for me to be invited here to talk to you a little bit about all the exciting stuff that we have been working on. Uh, One of the things that I get to do with my team is to learn. We get to take a peek at things a little bit early and try to figure out what's there and then try to come and help everybody else understand it. So, a lot of the same things that you're going through now with trying to understand what's in this release, why should I care? We did the same things. We were trying to say, okay, what is it that we did? How do we use it? And today I'd like to walk through kind of the slides that we put together. I kind of collected top level tour features of what's in the release, but I want to show you some stuff too. My team has been trying to go through as a development team. So some of the tech stuff, I'm going to show some like very basic intro developer stuff to some of the new features that are in there. Now, I noted this in the chat, but in case you didn't see it, I'm going to take pauses through so we can do questions if anybody has questions. But because I have the monitor that I'm looking at, which has my presentation notes, and a monitor for screen sharing, I unfortunately won't be able to see the chat. So I'll try to swap back over during those breaks. If you do need to interrupt me for any reason, feel free to speak up. We're all friends here, right? So just speak up and pause me so I can come back to you. So, Sitecore 10, what's fancy and new? A lot of what we've done in this release is about efficiency, and specifically trying to bring the marketing and the IT teams together, allowing them to work kind of more in tandem, trying to get more efficient at delivering together. So, to help with that alignment, we knew that from a product perspective, how do we focus on things like time to market, usability, performance? Things that are going to help both teams work together more seamlessly, quickly, and do what they need to do. Ultimately, right now, where we are in the market is that customers are expecting that personalized experience, right? But that's not the only thing they expect. Now they expect new experiences. Their needs are going to change. They want you to keep up. There's going to be shifts in the market, like a global pandemic, and they're going to expect that you're responding to what's actually happening around you and adjusting how you speak with them. That means everybody, both dev, ops, you've got your marketing teams, they all have to deliver and update quickly. That means new content, that means new experiences, just to keep up with the demand from the customers. So our focus in Sitecore 10, I feel like that efficiency is really at the heart of a lot of the changes that I'm going to talk about today. So you've got IT, you've got marketing, they're trying to line up their timelines, they're trying to move faster. How do we get to this continuous delivery model? Now they're going to use everything from container infrastructure orchestration to integrated data or marketing functionality that can really get faster insights. Now, I'm going to spend a majority of the time, because of our typical audience and my own interests, on the tech side of things. And that's where we'll see the majority of the demos, as well as like, what's the new developer experience like? And I think that's really at the core of Sitecore 10 where the big stuff is the new options on the tech side. I'll also at the end, hoping we have time, be able to walk through some of the pieces that are in the marketing side as well, because there are some new functionality there that I think is going to be important for our customers. Now, if we just took this at like a high level, what's new for developers? It's about delivery flexibility, getting somewhere faster. So we heard a lot of feedback. Sitecore already had a lot of options. You could do a lot of different things from a development perspective, but people kept asking, when are containers going to come? When are you going to do Docker? You saw the community repos that happened for the Sitecore Docker images on 9. The demand was there. Headless development with JSS, hugely popular, but We restricted it to JavaScript. So how do we bring ASP.NET developers into that world? How do we get ASP.NET Core? That was a big thing people were asking for. And how do we do better serialization tooling? Do I use Unicorn? Do I use TDS? Some people want one, some teams want the others. You can't really work together, right? You have to pick one or the other. So we added support for Docker. Kubernetes, we're delivering specs. There's a new Sitecore provided image repository. So you can start moving towards a continuous delivery model, infrastructure as code, that type of stuff. And all of that is in addition to any existing delivery stuff. So you can still keep with the way you're used to if you wanted to upgrade, but you have new options available to you if your team really wants to take advantage of that. And by adding the ASP.NET Core SDK, it gives us another headless option. So you get a very similar to experience to JSS. So you're going to be able to do JSS, or you can choose ASP.NET Core and have that, latest and greatest .NET technology for your presentation layer. The other part where we talk about serialization, you got Sitecore CLI, Sitecore for Visual Studio. Those are the big additions that there allow teams to really automate their content through environments, focusing on different developer experiences, getting the same functionality. The first area I want to dive into is going to be containers. I think have people here even had, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at some of the videos that have been done in the community around Docker. There's been some presentations that have been done. I know Rob from my team has done some. I've seen some from Cam, and Mark Cassidy's been pushing it, as has Bart. There's been a lot of talking about how do we get Docker into the developer environment. So why is everybody so excited about this, right? Why is it so important? I think any of us who have had to develop on a virtual machine understand the horrible pain of doing so and how much resources it takes up. So I think if you move towards a Docker-driven development and infrastructure flow, there's a lot of benefits for you. The ones I have up here on the screen are kind of 4 major areas that I think are going to be big deals for the developers and ops teams. So first of all, how do you drive down that total cost of ownership? So you want to reduce some costs, but you need to bring people onto your team more quickly, right? A lot of our partners, you've got to have a developer on one project and they've got to switch over to another project. And how do they get started? How do they get set up? How do they install everything? You want to be able to work faster. You don't want to wait on Sitecore reloading, right? You want to have that local development efficiency. You want to be able to move quicker. You want to be able to just be more efficient, right? There's also a certain amount of prerequisites to running Sitecore, right? Do I have the right Solr version? Do I have the right SQL Server version? Do I have the Redis installed for my session? What are all those bits and pieces? Moving to containers allows you to kind of abstract that away so that the team can kind of set it up, and then you don't think about it. You spin up your containers, and that handles all of that. And on the ops side, you've got a whole slew of new tools available to you now, because now you're running with containers. You get to leverage all that industry standard container technology as well. So similar to when you went to PaaS and now you've got all of Azure's PaaS tools, when you move to containers, now you have all of the container infrastructure tools that are available. So in general, if you move to a containerized approach, that continuous delivery model becomes that much easier. Now, I've been speaking for a few years about doing DevOps culture changes, and it's not a technology change. It is a person change, a organization change management piece. You have to get people to want to continuously deliver. But technology can help. Technology can support that. And I believe that as teams go towards this, they're going to see that, oh, this tech is kind of not working in the traditional way. It's harder to do that model. It seems to make me want to work faster. It really makes it easier for you to go down that path and drives you down a way that'll allow you to deliver more efficiently and faster. Now, there's 2 teams that I think are going to really get different types of benefits. If you just want to do things Docker developer, you're going to be able to quickly spin up your stuff. You're going to be able to share your developer images with other members of your team so that as you make improvements, their environments can get up and started quicker and add new things in. So one of the things that I've loved is that I don't care if I throw away my instance anymore. Everything's being run out of source control. So, Rob goes off and he makes a whole bunch of changes, and I just destroy my entire environment. I spin it back up, inside of 10 minutes, and I'm all good, right? So I get rid of all that worry about, oh no, how do I get things up to date with what's latest? And everything is a lot faster that way. From an operations perspective, you can actually take this container infrastructure and take it beyond just a developer thing. It can go into your staging environments. You can take it with Kubernetes into your production environments. Those teams can figure out, how do we orchestrate all these containers and get high availability? How do we get the redundancy we need? The other benefit here is also every single cloud provider, I think for the most part, like you can get some kind of managed Kubernetes service. So you've got AKS in Azure. I think it's called EKS in AWS. And Google has its own platform for container services. And this gives you a little bit of option, right? You can pick which cloud vendor you want to work with. And finally, I think if you're one of those organizations that's running everything on a bunch of VMs, you're going to see some cost reduction as well, because containers are more lightweight than that VM. So if you had 5 VMs and now you run 5 containers instead on the same physical hardware, you're going to be able to save a lot more. So that's another benefit that ops teams can look at in terms of trying to reduce their footprints. Now, one caveat there is like it's so easy that sometimes people forget to clean up. So you can wind up with container sprawl. So that's one thing to watch out for, is just someone's going to have to make sure they're actually managing that if what they're looking at is cost reduction. Now, what I want to do is look at, what does a container infrastructure look like for a developer? So what I'm going to show is the container infrastructure we use on our development team. So this is something that Rob put together to make it easy for all of us to get set up. We've got the typical, I got to get a SQL server in there for my databases. So that's one Docker container. Solar's running in a different Docker container, and I've got Redis for my session. And then I've got the Sitecore instances: content delivery, content management, identity server. This is a very simple XM, CDCM, nothing complicated, no XDB, just I want to do some basic development. And that's your traditional, and it's very similar to what you would see in a 9.3 as well. Because we decided to go with a headless approach, we also have an extra role here, which is our rendering host. So it's separate from content delivery, and it's talking to content delivery, but it runs in its own container, and it doesn't have any Sitecore installed, just the SDK and an ASP.NET Core app. Another new piece that is in Sitecore 10 that you'll see in a lot of the image setups is traffic. This is reverse proxy, and it allows for, as you make requests in, it figures out which container should actually come back. So if you try to go to the rendering host, it goes, yeah, that container's over here. I'm going to let you get into the right place. So this is a nice, easy way to connect all the dots. Now, we're going to go and we're going to take a look at some of this now. So the first thing that I want to show is that traffic piece. And in concert with that, I'm going to bring up Docker desktop. So I'm not a huge command line guy. I think if you're really into all the tools, there's a lot of really cool monitors that you can put in and tools that you can use to, I just install Docker desktop. It's really easy. I can turn it on, turn it off, get rid of my containers really simply. So here we can see a bunch of different containers that got spun up. And like we saw in the architecture diagram, I've got my Solar, Redis, and SQL server kind of running there. And then I've got my identity server, my CD, and my CM. Then we have the new rendering role running as a container, and my traffic. And when I look at traffic, I can see that we've got these Docker container icons here. That's showing those containers that are running that it wants to route requests to. And you can see here's the rendering site. Here's my ID site. Here's my CM. Here's my CD. And you'll see these host names over here. So this allows that if somebody comes in on that particular entry point, then it goes, okay, I got to route that over to the secure service that's over there. And so if I want to go to my rendering, I have to use this hostname. So that's pretty, simplistic. Now we're going to go over and take a look at, let me pull that up, the rendering host. So here, I'm just going to pull up the site. We've been working at trying to take the mvp.sitecore.com, which is a fairly simple site, and turn it into something in ASP.NET Core headless on Sitecore 10 running containers. And you'll see up here, I've got my domain name, mvp.sc localhost. That's what's matching up to traffic going over to this container. Now, if I go and try to access Sitecore, I get my normal login screen, right? There I've got the mvp.id.sc ID localhost. It's coming from, now I'm going into this container here. So I'm going to log in with my super secret password. And now I'm on CM. You can see in the URL. Now, if I take a look at traffic, what's that domain? That maps up to this container. So that's kind of the very basics of, okay, I've got things launched. What we're going to take a look at next is going to be the ASP.NET Core. But before I do that, let's see if we have any questions. Did anybody want to know about stuff? I'm going to just take a look at the chat. All right, so I've got a question from AG. How does SXA fit into this? And do we intend to develop SXA further? And when you use Headless.NET Core, when would you use SXA? Amazing question. I'll start with the first one. How does SXA fit into this? SXA is a development option, and I would say for most cases is probably where most teams are going to go if they want to be efficient. It runs straight on the content delivery instance, but it has a whole bunch of things out of the box that you can use. SXA is continuously being developed. We're doing more and more support for SXA in the different tools. Right now, we can't use SXA with SXA components with .NET Core. But I think if you're going down an SXA route, that might not be what you're trying to do anyway. So your final question is, when would you use Headless.NET Core and when would you use SXA? I'll rephrase that away from just the .NET Core, but when do you use Headless versus when do you use SXA? I think Headless comes into play when you start wanting to do a lot more customization. You have business needs that go beyond what SXA can really provide natively and easily. SXA can be customized quite a way, but there becomes a point where your business needs might be needing a more specific piece. And the reason I went away from .NET Core is that sometimes JSS might be the answer. For example, you might be trying to build an SPA. ASP Headless.NET Core is not going to be the solution for that, right? You might want to go JSS and pick React, for example. So I think it really comes down to what is the requirement that you have to do the site, and then start looking at it. And this is one of the guidance that Anastasia on my team has been putting together a diagram. She's trying to get this available for us right now. Is like, how do you pick which of these development options to do? Because we started talking about it, and it was like this super complicated flow diagram. Where like, if you do this, then you go over here, and we had to simplify and get down to it. And I think what we would like to see is over time moving away from custom MVC, where you're writing MVC on the content delivery instance and running it there. I think for most cases, if you're in that model where you're thinking, I can't use XXA, I can't use JSS, then you probably want to use ASP.NET Core rather than going to custom MVC right on the CD. That would probably be where you need to go. That being said, the ASP.NET Core stuff is new. Not all the tools support it 100%. So like, for example, you can't use Sitecore Forms. So if you need to use Sitecore Forms, then that would be another thing where you go, oh, that's a business requirement. What are the tools that support that? Now, Sitecore Forms will come later, but because this is the first iteration of it, there's a limitation. All right. So that's probably a good point for us to start talking headless. So one of the things that's big on the headless side of things is that we want to be able to build sites in ASP.NET Core. You want to work on the latest stuff. So here's an SDK that lets you do that presentation layer in ASP.NET Core, just like being a JSS headless developer if you're on a front-end team. Rapid local development, much lighter weight front end. And that makes you able to change things, debug things faster. It also means that from a talent perspective, if you're leading a team and you've got a lot of people who are looking to work on projects that are on the latest and greatest, it's going to be easier to attract or keep people who want to work on that technology. You also may be working with organizations that have already moved to ASP.NET Core for other applications, and you need to integrate with that. So it can become easier there. And by using routing, you can choose when you want to bring Sitecore into that app. So that allows you a lot more flexibility when you're working in those types of scenarios. Now, if you become the .NET developer who wants to do it, a lot of the changes that you're going to see are probably changes you saw when JSS came out, and you just wished that it wasn't in a front-end framework, right? Because we looked at a lot of feedback from customers and partners and developers that were so excited about headless delivery with JSS. We took all that community feedback and then we went, we need to have a better developer experience for our .NET developers too. So we use the exact same headless service. It's just one more SDK in the list, all working in that same headless. So now you can pick React, you can pick Angular, you can pick Vue, and now ASP.NET Core. That routing support allows you that you can go in and make sure that you might have a whole bunch of custom stuff that's going on that has nothing to do with Sitecore, and then you're only pulling in Sitecore when you need to. Another big advantage is that remote rendering host. So you can build straight from Visual Studio right into the rendering host. It means you're not recycling Sitecore. So you don't have to wait for the Sitecore spin up time. Now there are times when you have to do like a content service to be able to return some extra data from the backend. Okay, yeah, you might have to deploy something there. But if you're mostly just working with Sitecore out of the box, this allows you to like put your presentation layer and build it out real quickly. So we're going to come and take a very, very, very beginner look at what is it to do headless rendering. Now earlier I pulled up the MVP site. Now this is a ASP.NET Core rendering host that is connecting to Sitecore. And it has very simple stuff, like there's only a few layouts. Like if I look at the podcast page, it's a slightly different template that we're running. There's not much going on here. So how does this all come together from a code perspective? So because we're good citizens in the developer community, we did our example, and we're going to be putting this out in GitHub soon. I use quotes on soon because Rob's working on it. There's a few final things we gotta tweak to get it ready, and then we can push it out. But the first thing that happens is, how do we get my rendering site hooked in to Sitecore? Now with ASP.NET Core, you get this concept of a startup, which really does a lot of configuration. So you're doing configuration as code. And here you'll notice at the top, I've got a bunch of Sitecore SDK stuff, and then my specific project features, things getting pulled in here. And we're adding in the features that we need to run on this particular application, including the layout service. And you can see we're adding in our basic features that we want to have available, and also adding in experience editor support. And that's a big deal, right? We want to be able to, the marketing team still able to edit our pages. So by setting this all up, you can pick what's available and really contain the size of this application. Now, if I want to go look at what does one of those features look like. So I've been working on this page, and as a developer, I can see that there's this listing. I'm not entirely happy with it. So I'm going to go take a look at the 3-column layout for those. Now I can see here that I've got a very basic component that's putting a title and subtitle. For some reason, the item subtitle is first before the title. I don't like that. That seems to not make sense with me in my head. So I'm going to make a change here. Just going to reverse these. I'm just doing basic razor rendering, right? Super simple. Now, what I can do here, because this is not running on Sitecore, I can just run this straight from Visual Studio. I can just hit my debug thing, and I'm going to launch this app right here. Now, it's going to do a build and make sure I've got all my features here. And it's going to launch this up. We'll just wait a moment. So instead of running on my rendering host container, I've now got something that I'm running localhost. I've got my MVP site, and if I scroll down, hey, look, I got it reversed. So my changes picked up. I've done this, no change to Sitecore, and you saw there wasn't a huge delay in getting it going. All right, so I'm going to shut that down. I'm happy with the change that I made. But I want to debug it. Now, I could just debug it in what I just launched there, but I want to debug it inside the container. I want to debug what's running over there. So we're going to go take a look at the containers. In Visual Studio, you can now see all the containers that are running here. And I can see you've got MVP rendering, and I can see what the environment variables are there. And I'm going to attach to process. This is similar to how you would do it with attaching to IIS. I'm going to go pick my site that's down here. So this is the application process that's running. And I'm just going to attach, and I'm going to put a breakpoint here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the actual code that's running on the rendering host. And here we are. Immediately, I'm attached to it. I'm picking up. It's able to show me, what my subtitle is, what my title is. I can go pull that data out. I can do my full debugging right here in Visual Studio, attaching to my container process. You'll also notice, hey, code seems to have switched, but you didn't do a deploy. So this is something called .NET Watch. We've configured on our containers to look. So I'm going to come back and show you a little bit about that. So one of the things we have in here for our containers is how do we get everything set up? And that specific piece on my rendering Docker file has this configured. This watch is saying, hey, look at everything in this working directory and make sure you get it into this container. So my container is able to pick up my changes as I'm doing them. I don't have to deploy to an instance or something like that. I mean, I'm deploying to an instance, but I don't have to worry about it as much. It's kind of being handled for me by being configured in advance. And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about with the containers as well, is that in general, you are configuring how do you want your environment. You can set everything up with what the dependencies are, what your entry points are, and your team gets to set this all up for how your team wants to work. So you can inherit the Sitecore stuff and then go off and go and take a step into the next step. One of the things I forgot to show is how do we get started with containers. So one of the things that we have here is we have this PowerShell script. We have an init PowerShell script, which gets me the requirements for me to get going before I run up. But the up is really a wrapper around Docker Compose, and it allows me to build the images and then bring the images up so they start running. And this is the reason that I'm okay with tearing everything down, because I know if I tear everything down, I just run this script again, everything's going to come back up. Now, the reason we have a wrapper around Docker Compose and we're not just going and running it at the command line is because we wanted to do some extra stuff. So in order for me to be able to do what I did with the site and have it all ready to go, after building all the images, we wait for those images to be ready and running, and then we start using the CLI. So we can start automating stuff let's log into Sitecore, push all the content from our instance, and publish it. So when I get started development and I want to start changing code, I know all my content is there. It's ready to go. My rendering host already had everything. That was one of the cool things we were able to do and automate. And I didn't have to do any of that. That was actually another developer, right, who built all that out, passed it through source control, and all I'm doing is hitting up on my command line, and I'm able to get everything going. So I'll pause there again and see, does anybody have any questions on what we've seen so far in terms of containers and the ASP.NET Core? And one thing I do want to say while I'm here, you do not have to use containers to use ASP.NET Core. I'm showing you them together right now, but you can choose one or the other. Alrighty. I think that was a good point then to talk about serialization. So I showed you how we can log in and push and publish from the command line. Well, when we looked at this from a serialization perspective, we wanted to find how do we combine the best of TDS and Unicorn and where they overlap and just make it easier to script things like this. So you can move content between development instances, move content between environments, make it part of your Azure DevOps pipelines. So we've got two new tools. There's the Sitecore CLI. So that's what I was being called from the up script. So you can run it right in your command line. And it does things like publishing, login, serialization. But we also have the Sitecore for Visual Studio, which is a plugin that lets you work within Visual Studio on it. And they have the same feature set. So this allows the teams that are like, oh, I'd rather work in Visual Studio with a plugin, and then other members of the team would rather work with the command line. You don't have to choose. Each developer takes the tool they want, but everybody gets to work on the same set of serialization files. Now, the piece here that we're going to look at is how do we actually go about doing that? I showed a very simple code change. Now we're going to show a very simple content change. So what I want to do here is I'm going to right-click on my solution. And because I've installed Sitecore for Visual Studio, I have an option called the Sitecore Module Explorer, which lets me pull this up and I can go in and I can see all the stuff about my different features, the templates, and I can see the content for my MVP site. What I've got here specifically is like the content tree essentially, right? Is what I've got expanded so that I can see what sites are making up my developer version of the site. So if I want to get new stuff, I can pick a module and I can say, I want to pull items for this module. What's changed? No items to sync. Okay, all right. Well, I guess we need to make some content changes then. So let's head back. Let's make some content changes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to fix what I saw earlier, right? I swapped around my code, but I don't like that now the year is second. So when I'm looking at this, it's like now it says MVP Word 2014. I switched the code, but now I got to switch the content. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to switch that up. My content list, I know I've got my past winners. Here we are. I'm going to switch this around. That's a pretty straightforward instance of what I want to do. Now, the other piece that I want to be able to do is I want to do some content changes on the page, but I don't really want to do that in Content Editor. I'm gonna launch Experience Editor for that. So here I am in Experience Editor, and you'll notice something. Even though I'm running a remote rendering host, I'm seeing everything that is on the site. Now, we're obviously still in development, so you're going to see like, hey, the fonts don't look right. Yeah, we still got to get cores working so that it can pull things from across different sites. But effectively, the marketer is able to be in here editing like they normally would, right? I can be getting rid of the word active, and I'm going to make MVPs the excellent Sitecore community members that you are. Okay, I like that. Right. And now I'm going to look at the page. I'm like, you know what? It takes me a really long time to get to where the MVP award. Maybe I'm going to move this around. So as an author, I'm making a choice to change up the layout. All right, I've made that change. Now I'm going to test it. Now, to test it, well, I've got to publish that out. So publish my item. And I'm going to make sure I've got this published out too. Publish my changes. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm making sure everything goes from master to web so that my content delivery instance can talk to the very important rendering engine. So now I'm in the different container. I'm on the rendering engine separate from Sitecore. Bam. Got the new layout, got my new content. Everything's looking just like I like it. And I'm seeing it in my ASP.NET Core presentation layer. So I know it's all going through my presentation layer correctly. Okay, I've made my changes. Now I want to get those into Sitecore, into source control, I should say. So I'm going to refresh my sync. Hey, there's the 3 items that I just did. I can take a quick look to see what's gone. There's the content change I made, another content change, and here's the renderings change I did. All right, I'm going to select all that. I'm going to hit the sync button. Now, if I go over here, oh, it is something in the way there. All right, here we go. There's my changes that I made. I'm going to actually get rid of this one. These are the 3 YAML files that have been updated by the serialization tool. There's my code change. This is great. I've got all my changes here, and if I take a look at, say, the MVP award list, I can see what the changes are that were happening. I can share this with the rest of the team, but I've had second thoughts. Not sure I actually like this, all this just because, I wanted to make a slight change. I'm going to get rid of this. I don't want this anymore. I'm going to undo my changes. But when I come back to my rendering host, nothing seems to have changed here. But I undid my changes, right? Well, I undid my changes in my local instance, but I haven't updated over yet. So I need to figure out, how do I get what was in source control back? I want to do a revert. Now this is pretty easy, but I'm not going to do it with SVS this time. I'm going to use the other serialization tool. We're going to use the Sitecore CLI. So I'm at my command prompt. You'll notice I made sure that I'm in my project directory, so I've got access to everything that's there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a .NET Sitecore serialization command to push, because what I want to do is take things from where source control is. I want to push it into Sitecore. But I'm not so sure about what's going to happen. So I'm going to add the what if flag. This makes sure I don't make changes, but I can see what's going to change. Oh, there's those 3 items. That's exactly what I want to change. Okay, I want to revert those items. I'm going to get rid of my what if flag. I'm going to run a push. Now, it's discovered the 3 changes. It's taken it and it's pushed it over. Okay, I'm almost done, because I know I've changed what's in the content tree in the master database, but I do need to do a publish. So I'm going to write .NET Sitecore publish. This is going to invoke on the master, the content management system, a publish action. I don't have to click in any dialogues. Like you saw me, I have to go click, pick single item, blah, blah, blah. It's very fast. It's all done. I come back. There it is, back to active. Oh, I've got my types back here. Everything is looking good. It's even reverted my code changes. So it's just as easy as that. And I could have a team that's partially working in command line, partially working in Visual Studio. It works great. Alrighty. Did we have any questions at this point from what I've shown so far? Alrighty. Well, this concludes the developer demo portion of the thing. I have one last thing on the tech side that I wanted to talk about. And that was performance and monitoring. So I talked about efficiency, and everything I just showed was very much about, like, how do you work with this new developer experience, how similar it is to what you did before and what's different. Well, there was a whole bunch of stuff done under the hood to just make things easier and faster. So whether that's, reducing content delivery response times, or loading data only when we need it, or making it easier for you to debug or to monitor applications, like things like the application map for XConnect. That was something that was really asked for people running in Azure. So all of these things were added in with the goal of making it easier for you to run your instances, build it, and also operate and perform. So we're going to switch now a little bit into the marketer side of things. Most of the big changes we looked at were in the tech side, but there are a few enhancements for marketing teams we're going to take a tour of. And all of it, again, how do we make things more efficient? How do we get Horizon to cover more? We want that new UX to have more. We introduced it in 9.3, but we needed to do multilingual. We needed to be able to handle multi-site solutions. We needed to be able to have a way for you to have better analytics in the reporting. And how do you get Salesforce Marketing Cloud to run in real time? A lot of organizations are running into issues with their data privacy journey. How do we put more tools there? We did a bunch in 9. Can we add some more? So 10 has addressed a lot of these types of things by adding incremental improvements here. Now, the first one, and I'll show this, is personalizing on a CMS only. So in Sitecore 9, you had this, if you wanted to run XM, it was super lightweight and didn't have a lot of stuff in it. It was a very lightweight infrastructure, but you couldn't personalize. So we wanted to be able to bring session and device rules and things like that to a CMS only install. You don't need to install the full XP and then run CMS only to get to some of the rules. And over time, we're going to try to bring in more and more rules into this. And we're going to take a look at this right now. So remember that I was running Experience Editor over here. Now I'm going to drill in to my podcast. No, sorry, the Become an MVP page. Here I've got a header at the top. I'll do it here on the rendering edge as well so we can see what it looks like. So this is what's showing up on the rendering engine. Here's my editing experience. I'm going to do a quick personalization here. So even though I'm in XM only, I have the option to personalize. I'm going to say on the 14th because today is an awesome day. And I'm going to add a new rule. So here we've got access to things about dates. I've got a lot of browser and device information rules, field rules, item information, and security stuff. So you can obviously add to these, but this is the type of stuff that's out of the box. And in my current one, I want the day of the month. I want it to be equal to 14. And when that's true, I want to use a big hero. So I'm going to swap the presentation a little bit. Same content, new presentation. I can take a look as an editor and say, okay, yeah, that's kind of huge, but let's go with that. I'm going to save my changes. Now I have to publish, but because I'm not exactly wanting to do a bunch of things, I'm just switching over to CLI, get things published real quick. Make sure I'm picking up everything. All right, now I'm going to refresh here. So I'm running remotely from content delivery. I'm consuming that personalization through the content delivery instance, and it's coming over to my rendering engine. So I've got all that marketing capability. I can have a lightweight infrastructure, do some basic personalization, and use Headless, right? All of it together. So that was kind of like the wrap up of what I wanted to kind of show what you can do with a very simple XM. Now, if we go beyond the traditional tooling that we had, there's Horizon. I mentioned we were doing some improvements to Horizon, more SXA support, the multilingual, the multi-site. We also put in a new field editor experience, which is going to get even better in future releases. So now you can go in, you can do page metadata and kind of see all the content, not just the pages. So this allows you to stay within Horizon and start doing more and more. Previously, you have that kind of like switch between content editor and experience editor, similar type of idea, but now you're staying in Horizon and swapping how you want to look at content. And I mentioned SXA. All SXA sites can be loaded up and for the most part are going to work, but we know that there's still a few things from an SXA perspective that for Horizon needs some work. So as we go through the Sitecore 10 series, SXA is going to get more and more functionality. And back to that earlier question, are we investing in SXA? Yes. This is one of the areas that we're doing is how do we get SXA and Horizon to really play nice together. Another piece that's nice in 10 is the people who have Content Hub DAM. If they also want to use Horizon, they could only work previously off the media library. But with 10, we've now introduced the ability for you to use images from the DAM now. So it's bringing that story of working together a lot better. Again, back to that efficiency of how do we get these different teams working together. In terms of connecting with folks, new layouts are available. So, marketers don't have to create as much HTML on their own. So there's 3 new templates out of the box for left image, right image, and an image focus. There's also support for Scriven, so you can edit them just like you would edit an SXA variant, which is great if you have the capability in the team to do that. Birthday rules. It's kind of a fun little thing to put in there. It's not huge, but the ability for you to connect with a customer around their birthday. So you've got the birthday stored in XDB, and you can send a message out a few days before, or maybe you want to send a greeting to them on their birthday, or remind them a couple of days after the birthday that you want to follow up. So those are the types of things you can do. I think the really cool one, though, is this audience insights thing. So the analytics report, you can now filter by a segment. So this means that you could be doing your marketing, like sending out an email in EXM to a segmented list, but then you can go to your analytics report and see, well, what was the impact for that segment on the site specifically? So you can have kind of a good path across the journey and start seeing more about that. And you can report on the performance of those specific groups that are key to you. So that's a really good tool for marketers. I mentioned Content Hub going into Horizon, but we're also talking about how do we get more content modeling happening in Content Hub. Having content strategists define what does an event look like, right? For all of their channels. It's got to have a title, a date, a description, maybe an image. They can model this out in Content Hub, use it across any of the things they integrate with. An experience platform becomes one of those channels. So then the web team can get this kind of centralized content strategy and then do the extra layer of how do we make this ready for the web instead of having to duplicate the work. So I think as we go through, we're going to see more and more of this type of change where we can start modeling content in Content Hub and then consuming it in other channels. So this was another improvement in 10 where we tried to make that flow better. I mentioned privacy, big deal. GDPR, I think recently in California, there was, I think, the CCPA. Every country has their own privacy regulations. So a lot of organizations are focused on that. In Sitecore 9, we did a really good job of giving a lot of tools, especially around XConnect to deal with XDB data. But there were a few pieces that were missing. So one of them was Sitecore Forms. You could do it, but it wasn't as easy. So we wanted to make that easier. How do we get new tools in there for you to anonymize the data and still be able to report on it? So it redacts information, removes files, removes associations to contacts, but the marketing team can still report on how the forms are doing. Another piece is the right to object. So from a privacy perspective, you want to be able to manage what consent people have. We are all used to those, nice little alert boxes that say, hey, do you consent to cookies on this site? We're going to track you. We want to watch everything you do. And you have to say, yes, I do consent. And sometimes there's multiple options, things like that. But everybody was hand rolling this, having to do it themselves. And how does Sitecore provide more tools there? So we did things like, let's make sure that those consent choices can be stored in XDB. Let's make sure that you can configure a site to listen to consent choices so the tracking gets automatically turned off. So if somebody does not consent to tracking, that the tracker won't even operate on them and they're anonymized, basically, their behavior. We also needed to be able to say, well, that's probably, some sites will need that, some sites won't. So it's like a site-specific configuration. So all of this is about trying to give more tools for consent management so that implementation teams can just get stuff done faster. The other thing that we have is that we have to recognize that while Sitecore Marketing Automation does some things, some teams don't use that as their marketing automation tool. They're using Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And we were getting feedback that we needed it more real time. There was a sort of like consistent batch update process that you could do where data from XDB could be synchronized over to Salesforce and you could leverage content. And there's a good story around it, but there was a need for more. So in 10, we can make that connection in real time. So now you have a new Salesforce marketing automation activity inside Sitecore marketing automation. So you can put this activity in, configure it using values from Salesforce Marketing Cloud to immediately push a visitor into a journey builder marketing automation plan. And so that means that if you're running your marketing automation in Salesforce, you can run something in Sitecore to listen to something that happens on the website, immediately put that visitor over into the right plan over in Salesforce, and respond in all your events over there in real time now. And I think that's going to be really big for our customers that use that. All right, so that I love the end part where we get to chat. I know I spoke for a very long time here, so thank you for listening. Thank you for having some good questions, and hopefully we have some more questions and some time to do that right now. Love to hear what you think. What you think you would have liked to see in 10 that you haven't seen yet, and what kind of problems you're seeing that you'd like to have solved.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I posted several questions, but it seems that, yeah. So, are you required to use the Docker architecture you displayed, or can you use a custom one?
You can use, so the Docker architecture is a completely new option in addition to existing options.
Okay, yeah, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to go and use SIF and deploy on your on-premise, you can do that. If you want to do ARM templates, you can go up to app services. I do think that the direction we want to go in is down the container route. I think we see more benefit there. So I think that's where you'll see a lot of Sitecore's marketing going in terms of what we're talking about. And I think you'll also see a lot of product enhancements going in that direction. So depending on what your team needs are, you have all the tools available to there, but I would say that containers is definitely where we see the future going.
Okay, yeah. And about the serialization for Sitecore, is that compatible with Unicorn and other existing solutions?
So it doesn't use the same serialization file. It's very similar to what's in Unicorn. It's very different from what's in TDS. So TDS still exists. Unicorn's still out there. They've got their thing and it does it. We do have a way for you to, if you have a Unicorn project, for you to bring it into the new serialization format quite easily. I think it was Vitali who even went and looked at, like, can I just ditch Unicorn and go to Sitecore CLI? And that approach can be done. We don't currently have a way for you to take a TDS project and bring that down into the new serialization format. I don't know that we would actually go that route. I think if you're going TDS, you're doing a different thing. But definitely, it's very close to a Unicorn style.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. It was like almost the same.
Well, it helps that we had Cam kind of working on it, right? So Cam Figge, who kind of architected originally with Unicorn, and then joined Sitecore, and then he's like, you know what, I want to do CLI. Other people were involved as well, but I think Cam helped align those things and work with Charlie, who was the product manager on TDS, to go, okay, what are the best things in the TDS, so they could kind of bring together the best of both worlds. So we think that this is a way that we can hopefully bring people together so people have the option.
And my last question. So the CLI publish, is that compatible with the Sitecore publishing service?
Oh, I'd have to look. I think it invokes a management service that's on the CM and triggers the publish, but I haven't looked whether or not that then triggers a publishing service. So I apologize. I'll have to go get that one. Let me take that one down. I know for sure it works with normal publish, but I'm not sure about publishing service.
I was just wondering, since
I know that the current model triggers the publish on the CM instance, but I can't remember how it does that to know whether or not it's abstracted enough to then just listen to whatever's configured, or whether it's directly talking to the publishing pipelines. So I'll get back to that, and I'll make sure. Yeah. Right. Sorry, what was the name on for the question?
For my name.
Yes, your name. Sorry, so I can get back to you.
Alex Dalens.
Yes. Make sure to tag you when I put that out.
Yep. All right. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. It was quite interesting.
Oh, I'm glad you were able to enjoy it. If anybody has questions but doesn't want to speak up, you can drop it in the chat. But also, I know we're running up against time here, and I know it's getting late in Chennai. Oh, okay. There's a bunch
I
of
hope,
questions here in the chat. Sorry.
yes.
I'm just going to go through here. Would you run your data in containers in production or use Azure SQL? Okay, great question. Right now, the way Sitecore ships for production, we suggest you using Azure SQL. There are actually a couple of different pieces that you don't want to run in containers when you are in production. Trying to remember off the top of my head, I think it's Redis and Azure SQL, and there's, I think, two other pieces. Your Sitecore infrastructure, you can probably run that, but there's some other pieces that you're probably better using the native things that are already containerized or otherwise hosted. Looks like Eric got his question answered. Alex's questions here we just went through. Eric Ramser asks, so with this, will the authors ever have to go into real Sitecore, or can they simply use our front ends? Okay, so what I showed in terms of authoring was someone logged into content management. They were in real Sitecore using real Sitecore. And then the rendering engine was the presentation layer. It had no authoring capabilities whatsoever. So an author who wanted to make changes should be going into Sitecore. But as a developer, you don't need to wait for all that Sitecore stuff to happen when you're making your code for your front end. So you can be building out your renderings, building out your features, pushing that to your ASP.NET Core while everything else happens over in content management. Now, I suppose if you wanted to, you could build something that was an ASP.NET Core app that talked through a headless API like SSC and did all things, basically rebuilding the content management experience. But I think you would be better off leaving the authors in the Sitecore world using Sitecore for Sitecore marketing stuff. But hopefully as we disconnect these where the dev teams don't have to be doing as much on that, that'll also help down the road, having projects built in a way where people are thinking about presentation layer separate from marketing layer. Parthaban, I hope I got that pronunciation right, asks, is Sitecore for Visual Studio licensed like TADS? Yes and no. So Sitecore for Visual Studio is licensed, i.e. it's not free, but it is licensed as part of TDS. So if you already have a TDS license, you can use the exact same license file for Sitecore for Visual Studio. So it's free if you have TDS, but there's no way to get it without, it's kind of like a bundle package. They kind of go together. Two ways of working. I know, Eric, you had to run, so you probably didn't get to hear my answer. I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you, Jason, for such an amazing session on the new features of Sitecore. Actually,
Well, thank you for having me.
it was very good to know more about the ASP.NET Core Headless also. Thank you for your valuable time, and it is such a wonderful session to hear from you. Thanks to all the participants also.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks a lot.